The sun was only just rising over the dry hills when the cowboy named Luke Carson rode his horse along the narrow path that led toward the edge of the Apache land. He had traveled this way many times before, but that morning felt different. The air was quiet, almost too quiet, and he sensed that something unusual was waiting just beyond the next bend in the trail. Luke was a calm man by nature, someone who avoided trouble when he could. He preferred peaceful sunrises, long rides, and honest work on the ranch where he lived. But he had also learned, from years of living near the frontier, that unexpected moments sometimes changed a person's life without warning. He felt that kind of moment coming now, though he did not yet know why. As he turned the corner, he saw a small figure sitting on the ground beside a fallen tree. At first, he thought it might be a child, because the person looked so small and fragile. But when he moved closer, he saw that it was a young Apache woman, her dark hair tangled, her clothes dusty from travel. She seemed afraid to look up, as if she expected danger from every direction. Luke stopped his horse and slowly stepped down. He did not want to frighten her. She looked too weak, too exhausted, to handle even a small shock. He took off his hat in a gesture of respect and spoke gently, keeping his voice steady and calm. "Are you hurt?" he asked softly. The woman lifted her eyes only for a moment before lowering them again. Her voice was so quiet he could barely hear it when she answered, "No, not hurt. Just tired." Luke could see more than tiredness. He could see fear, worry, and something that looked like hopelessness. It was the kind of expression he had seen on people who felt lost, people who believed they had no place in the world. Her hands trembled slightly as she held them together in her lap. She looked as though a strong wind could have pushed her over. He moved closer, but slowly, respecting her space. "Do you need help?" he asked. She shook her head, though her eyes said the opposite. "I am too small," she whispered. "I cannot do what others can. I am not strong enough to survive out here." Luke watched her for a moment, trying to understand. She was indeed small, much smaller than most people he had met, but weakness was not something he liked to assume about anyone. He had learned long ago that size did not always measure strength. Character did, courage did, and sometimes, people who looked fragile carried the greatest power inside them without even knowing it. The woman looked toward the hills, as if expecting someone to appear. When no one did, she hugged her arms around herself. "I cannot go back," she said quietly, "but I cannot do this alone either. My family told me I am too delicate, too fragile to survive away from them. They said the world outside would break me." Luke could hear the pain in her voice, and for a moment, he saw her not as a stranger, but as someone who had been carrying doubts for a very long time. Life on the frontier was hard for anyone, even the strongest men. For someone who already believed she was too small or too weak, it must have been terrifying. "What is your name?" Luke asked. "Anoki," she replied softly. "It means, actor of bravery. But I do not think I live up to it." Luke sat down on a nearby rock, letting his horse rest beside him. He kept his tone warm and patient. "Names can come true in time," he said. "Sometimes, people grow into them." Anoki looked confused for a moment. Her eyes were large and dark, filled with uncertainty. "My family said I should stay close to them," she said. "They said I am not made for long journeys. I am not strong. I am not enough." Her voice trembled as she spoke, as if saying the words out loud made them more painful. Luke felt something shift inside him. A sense of protective concern. He had seen people doubt themselves before, but Anoki's doubt seemed so deep that it almost shaped the way she breathed. "You made it this far on your own," Luke pointed out gently. "That already proves something." She looked down at her hands again. "It was only luck." Luke shook his head slowly. "People who rely on luck don't usually get this far." Anoki looked up, slightly surprised. It was as if she had not expected anyone to say something hopeful about her. She had grown used to hearing what she could not do, what she lacked, what she was not capable of. Hearing someone say she had already shown strength felt almost unreal. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The breeze brushed lightly over the hills, carrying the scent of dry grass. The quiet moment felt heavy, but also strangely comforting. Like the world had paused just for them. Luke finally asked, "Where were you trying to go?" "Where?" She hesitated before answering. "Anywhere that lets me live my own life," she said. "But everywhere seems too large for someone like me. I feel I will be pushed aside or forgotten. My voice is small. My body is small. I do not think I was made for this world." Luke leaned forward slightly, his voice steady and serious. "Everyone is made for this world," he said. "Some just take longer to see where they fit." Anoki stared at him, unsure if she believed him yet. She looked as though she wanted to trust his words, but had spent too many years hearing the opposite. Luke knew this kind of struggle. He had worked with wild horses that took months to trust, months to realize they were stronger than they believed. People were not much different. "Come with me to the ranch," he offered gently. "Just to rest. Not forever. Just until you get your strength back." Anoki looked frightened again, as if stepping into a new place was another burden she was not ready to carry. I cannot promise I will be useful," she whispered. "I am not strong enough to help anyone." Luke smiled kindly. "I'm not asking you to help anyone. I'm offering help to you." For a moment, Anoki's eyes filled with emotion, fear, hope, confusion, and gratitude all mixed together. Her world had suddenly changed direction, and she was struggling to understand it, but she slowly nodded. Luke stood, took her hand gently, and helped her rise. Her hand felt light in his, almost weightless, but he held it carefully, not tightly, not forcefully, just enough to let her feel safe. The morning sun warmed her face as she took her first step toward the ranch. She still looked unsure, still looked small and fragile. But something inside her had shifted, maybe only a little, maybe almost nothing, but Luke could see it. A spark, a beginning. As they walked side by side, Anoki whispered one more thing, her voice barely louder than the breeze. "I hope I can learn to be stronger." Luke glanced at her with a calm, steady gaze. "You will," he said, "one step at a time." And with that, part one of their journey began, not with strength or confidence, but with a quiet, fragile hope that would grow into something much larger than either of them could yet imagine. The road to the ranch was long and dusty, but Luke walked slowly so Anoki would not feel pressured. Every few minutes he glanced at her, checking whether she was tired or uncomfortable. She walked quietly, keeping her hands close to her chest, as if she feared the world might reach out and pull her away at any moment. Her steps were soft and careful, the steps of someone who had learned to make herself small in a world that felt too big. Luke wanted her to feel safe, but he also did not want to overwhelm her with questions. So he kept his voice low and steady whenever he spoke. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the dry grasslands. The wind was warm, carrying the smell of earth and distant pine trees. With each step, Luke hoped Anoki was feeling just a little less alone. After some time, Anoki slowed down and stopped walking. Her breathing had grown heavy, and sweat had gathered on her forehead. She looked embarrassed, as if stopping to rest was something she should apologize for. "I need a moment," she whispered. Luke nodded right away. "Of course. You don't have to push yourself." She sat on a smooth rock by the side of the path. Luke gave her a canteen of water, and she held it with both hands because it seemed heavy for her. She drank slowly, as if afraid to take too much. When she handed it back, her hands trembled slightly. "You can drink as much as you need," Luke said gently. Anoki looked down, her expression unsure. "I do not want to be a burden." Luke crouched down so he could meet her eyes. "You're not a burden. Needing rest doesn't make anyone weak." She listened, but Luke could tell she didn't fully believe him yet. She had spent too long thinking the opposite. He stood again and looked toward the ranch, still a long walk away, but close enough that he could see the line of trees marking the land. "Almost there," he said softly. Anoki nodded and slowly stood up. Her legs were shaking a little, but she didn't complain. Luke offered her his arm, not grabbing her, not pulling her, just offering support. She hesitated, then gently placed her hand on his arm, using him for balance. Her touch was so light he could barely feel it. But he understood the meaning behind it. Trust did not come easily for her. As they continued walking, Luke noticed she kept glancing around, studying every sound and shadow. Her instincts were sharp, the instincts of someone who had lived her whole life cautious of danger. A bird flapped from a nearby bush, and she flinched. A tumbleweed rolled across the path, and she paused as if expecting something to jump out behind it. "You're safe," Luke told her softly. Anoki breathed slowly, trying to calm herself. "I know. I am just not used to going far from home," Luke nodded. "It's all right. It will get easier." They walked a while longer until the ranch finally came into full view. It was a quiet place, wide open land, a wooden fence, a barn with a slightly tilted roof, and a small house with smoke rising from the chimney. Nothing fancy, but warm and peaceful. Luke lived alone there, except for the animals he cared for. The moment Anoki saw the ranch, she stopped walking again. Luke looked at her and noticed a mixture of fear and wonder in her eyes. "This is your home?" she asked. "Yes," Luke replied. "And for now, it can be a safe place for you." Anoki slowly walked forward. Her steps were hesitant, as if she feared the moment she got close, someone might push her away. Her gaze moved over the barn, the fenced corral, the quiet porch. It was all unfamiliar to her, yet something about the stillness seemed to calm her. Luke opened the gate and motioned for her to go inside. She crossed the threshold with slow, careful steps, like someone entering another world. The ranch dog, a friendly brown mutt named Copper, ran toward them, barking in excitement. Anoki jumped back in fear, almost falling. Luke quickly placed a hand near her, not touching, but there if she needed balance. "It's all right," he said. "He won't hurt you." Copper wagged his tail wildly, circling around them. Anoki's eyes widened, and she held her hands tightly against her chest. Luke knelt beside the dog and stroked his fur. "See? He's friendly," Luke said. "Just excited to meet someone new." Anoki watched carefully. After a moment, she reached out one small, trembling hand. Copper sniffed it, then gently licked her fingers. Anoki gasped quietly, surprised by the soft, warm touch. "He likes you," Luke said with a smile. Anoki withdrew her hand quickly, unsure how to react. But there was a tiny spark of amusement in her eyes, something fragile but real. Luke led her to the house. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of fresh bread. Anoki stood at the doorway, uncertain whether she was allowed to step inside. Luke realized this and nodded. "You can come in. You're welcome here." She took a small step forward and looked around the simple room. There was a wooden table, 2 chairs, a small fireplace, and shelves filled with practical things, dishes, lanterns, a few books, and tools. Everything had a place. Everything felt steady and grounded. "You can rest here," Luke said. "I'll get you something to eat." Anoki sat down slowly on the edge of a chair, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. She looked like someone who didn't want to take up too much space. Luke brought her bread, fruit, and warm stew. She ate slowly, politely, as if afraid to look greedy. Luke saw that she was hungrier than she allowed herself to show. "You don't have to hide how hungry you are," he said kindly. "You're safe here." Anoki looked down. "I am not used to being taken care of," she admitted softly. Luke sat in the other chair, keeping a respectful distance. "Everyone deserves care." She ate a little more, then stopped and studied him. "Why are you being kind to me?" The question was simple, but the way she asked it made Luke realize something important. She truly didn't expect kindness from people. She was waiting for the moment someone would ask something in return or remind her of her weaknesses. Luke kept his voice steady. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said. "And because you deserve help. You're strong, even if you don't see it." Anoki shook her head. "I am small. Weak. Everyone says so." Luke looked at her seriously. Size doesn't decide strength. Heart does. She lowered her gaze, unsure how to respond. Luke could see she wanted to believe him but didn't know how. You walked all this way alone, Luke continued. That took courage. Anoki's eyes softened, and she took a slow breath. Maybe. A little, Luke nodded. More than a little. She seemed to think about his words for a long moment. Then she whispered, Thank you. The ranch stayed quiet for the rest of the afternoon. Luke showed her a small room where she could sleep. It was simple. A bed, a blanket, and a window that looked out toward the hills. Anoki touched the blanket gently, as if surprised by the softness. She traced her fingers along the wooden frame, taking in every detail of her new temporary space. Is this really for me? She asked. For as long as you need it, Luke said. Anoki stood there, her posture still tense, but her eyes filled with a kind of delicate peace. She was not fully confident yet, not fully comfortable, but she was no longer alone on the long path through the frontier. She had taken her first steps into a world where she might finally learn her own strength. As evening came, Luke stepped outside to check the animals. When he returned, he found Anoki sitting by the window, looking at the sunset. Her small frame was outlined by the golden light, and for the first time, she didn't look afraid of the world outside. Luke didn't disturb her. He simply watched quietly, knowing this moment mattered to her. Anoki whispered softly, almost to herself, Maybe. I can be more than I thought. Luke smiled gently. You can, he said. And you will. And as the sun set beyond the hills, part 2 of their journey came to a close, not with fear, but with the beginning of something new. Something hopeful. Something Anoki had never allowed herself to imagine before. The next morning began quietly. A soft light entered through Anoki's small window, painting the room in gentle colors. For a few seconds, she forgot where she was. She had spent so many nights sleeping on hard ground, or in places where she never felt safe, that waking up in a calm, peaceful room felt strange. When she finally remembered she was at Luke's ranch, she sat up slowly, unsure if she had the right to feel comfortable. Outside, she heard the steady sounds of morning, the soft footsteps of animals, the distant clucking of chickens, and Luke's calm voice talking to his horse. These sounds were new to her but strangely comforting. She stood, walked to the window, and watched Luke brushing the horse's mane with slow, practiced movements. The horse leaned into his hand, trusting him completely. Anoki wondered what it must feel like to trust someone that fully. She stepped out of the room, her steps light on the wooden floor. When she opened the door, Luke turned and gave her a small, warm smile. Good morning, he said gently. Anoki looked down shyly. Good morning, she whispered. You sleep well? He asked. Yes, she replied. More than I have in a long time. Luke seemed pleased to hear that. He handed her a small wooden bowl with warm porridge. She took it with both hands, as if holding something precious. They ate outside under the morning sky, sitting on the edge of the porch. The air was cool, and tiny drops of dew sparkled on the grass. After eating, Anoki watched Luke begin his chores. He worked with calm skill, feeding the animals, fixing the fence, filling the water trough. Anoki stood near the porch, unsure whether she should help or simply stay out of the way. She didn't want to be a problem, but she also didn't want to do something wrong. Luke noticed her hesitation and walked toward her. You want to learn a few things around the ranch? He asked in a friendly tone. Anoki blushed slightly. I do, but I am not good at many tasks. Luke chuckled softly. No one starts good. Everyone learns. She hesitated. What if I make mistakes? Then you learn from them, Luke replied. Mistakes don't make you weak. Mistakes don't make you weak. His calm reassurance encouraged her. She nodded, and he led her toward the barn. Her steps were small and careful, but she followed him closely. Inside the barn, the air smelled of hay and warm earth. Sunlight peeked through the wooden slats, creating soft golden stripes across the floor. Luke handed Anoki a small basket and pointed to the row of nests where chickens had laid eggs. You can collect the eggs. They're gentle creatures, he said. Anoki approached the nest slowly. She knelt down, moving with quiet respect. The chickens clucked softly, but none seemed afraid of her. She reached her hand inside one nest and gently lifted an egg. Her touch was cautious, her hands steady. She placed it into the basket, her eyes widening with a little spark of pride. I did it, she whispered, almost surprised. Luke smiled. See? You're already learning, Anoki continued, collecting egg after egg. Each one she placed in the basket with careful precision. When she finished, she held the basket close to her chest as if it was a treasure she had earned. This feels nice, she admitted. To do something useful. You're more capable than you think, Luke said. Throughout the morning, Luke taught her small tasks: how to sweep the barn floor, how to brush the horse's coat, how to carry water without spilling too much. Some tasks were easy for her. Some were difficult. When something felt too heavy or too tiring, she felt embarrassed and looked away. But Luke never let her feel ashamed. You did your best, he would say. That's all anyone can ask. Every kind word he spoke gently pushed away the heavy doubts she had carried for so long. But still, deep inside, a small voice whispered that she was fragile, and she didn't know if Luke was simply being kind or if he truly believed in her. Later in the afternoon, they walked to the far side of the ranch where the land opened into a wide field. The sky stretched endlessly above them, blue and clean. Anoki felt tiny beneath it. But for the first time, she didn't feel scared of her smallness. She felt part of something. Luke stopped near a patch of wildflowers growing by the fence. The flowers were small, delicate, yet vibrant. Anoki crouched beside them and touched one gently. They look fragile, she said softly. They're strong, Luke replied. They survive wind, storms, heat. They bend, but they don't break. Anoki looked at the flowers with new eyes. She wondered if Luke was speaking about them or about her. As evening approached, Luke went to check on the cattle in the lower pasture. He invited Anoki to join him, but she shook her head. I will stay near the house, she said. I do not want to slow you down. You wouldn't, Luke replied, but he respected her choice. Anoki sat on the porch as the sky turned orange and gold. She looked out over the land, listening to the quiet sounds of the ranch. Her body felt tired from the day's work, but it was a good kind of tired. The kind that came from learning and doing, not from fear. While sitting there, she thought about her past. Her family had always told her she was too delicate, too gentle, too small to handle the world. They didn't mean to hurt her. She knew that, but their words had become a cage around her heart. Every step she took on her own felt like a mistake waiting to happen. Every challenge felt too big. But here, at the ranch, Luke did not treat her like she was fragile. He helped her, guided her, encouraged her, but he never made her feel less. He treated her like a person capable of growing, and that made her feel something new, something warm and unfamiliar: hope. When Luke finally returned, the sun had almost disappeared behind the hills. He sat beside her on the porch. Not too close, not too far. Long day, he said softly. She nodded. But a good one. I'm glad, he replied. Anoki looked at her hands, still slightly dirty from the chores. I never helped on a ranch before. I thought I could not do anything like this. You did well, Luke said with a gentle smile. You learned fast. Anoki hesitated for a moment, then asked the question that had been growing in her heart all day. Do you really think I can be strong, even though I am small? Luke turned his head and looked at her with steady eyes. Strength isn't measured by size. I've known big men with weak hearts, and small people with incredible courage. Strength is what you carry inside. Anoki listened carefully, letting his words sink into her heart. She wanted to believe them. She wanted them to be true. Maybe I can learn to be strong, she whispered. Luke nodded. You're already learning. She felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. Not the warmth of comfort alone, but of returning confidence, something she had never fully felt before. As the stars began to appear in the sky, Anoki leaned back and gazed upward. Each star seemed small in the endless darkness, yet each one shone brightly without fear. She thought about the wildflowers, the animals, Luke's kindness, and the quiet strength she had seen in this place. For the first time in a very long time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she wasn't ruled by fear. A future where she could walk through the world without feeling like she didn't belong. A future where being small didn't mean being weak. Luke stood to go inside, but before he did, he paused and looked back at her. "You did well today, Anoki. I'm proud of you." Her heart swelled at the simple words. No one had ever said that to her before. She nodded softly, unable to speak for a moment. When she finally found her voice, it came out in a whisper. "Thank you for believing in me." Luke smiled gently, then stepped inside, giving her space to rest. Anoki stayed on the porch for a long time, watching the stars. She felt tired. She felt small. But she no longer felt invisible. She no longer felt hopeless. And deep inside her heart, a quiet but powerful truth began to grow. Maybe she was stronger than she had ever been told, and maybe, just maybe, she would learn to become everything she had once feared she could never be. The next days passed gently, each one a small step forward in Anoki's journey. She woke early every morning, helping Luke with chores before the sun rose high in the sky. At first, the work tired her quickly, but each day she improved a little. She learned how to handle small tools, how to move with balance, how to lift light bundles of hay without losing her grip. Her hands grew steadier, and her steps more confident. Luke always watched from a respectful distance, never rushing her, never letting her feel judged. When she succeeded, he praised her quietly. When she struggled, he guided her patiently. Anoki began to feel something she had never felt before: pride in herself. One afternoon, the wind blew stronger than usual, carrying dust across the wide land. Anoki was in the barn, organizing tools, a task Luke had trusted her with because she was careful and gentle. She was humming softly to herself when Luke entered. "Storm might come later," he said. "We should bring the horses inside." Anoki nodded and followed him outside. Dark clouds were gathering on the horizon. The air felt heavy, as if holding its breath. Luke whistled for the horses, and they trotted toward him. But one horse, a young mare named Willow, seemed nervous and backed away. Anoki watched carefully, noticing Willow's fearful eyes. She remembered how fear felt inside her own chest. Slowly, she walked toward the horse, hands relaxed at her sides. "It's all right," she whispered softly. "You are safe." Willow's ears twitched, and her breathing slowed just a little. Luke watched quietly, surprised at how calmly Anoki approached the frightened mare. Anoki raised her hand slowly, giving Willow time to understand she meant no harm. After a moment, the horse leaned forward and touched her palm gently. "You're scared," Anoki whispered. "I know that feeling." Luke stepped closer. "You're good with her," he said. Anoki's cheeks warmed. "I only spoke kindly." "Kindness is powerful," Luke replied. "Not everyone knows how to give it." Anoki led Willow toward the barn, her steps steady, her breath calm. Luke opened the gate. Watching her with admiration, he did not speak aloud. When the horse was safely inside, the wind grew stronger, pushing against the barn doors. Luke and Anoki secured everything, making sure the animals were safe. After finishing, they both stood near the barn entrance, watching the sky darken. "You did very well," Luke said. Anoki looked at him carefully. "I did not feel weak today." "That's because you're not weak," Luke answered. They returned to the house just as the first drops of rain fell. Inside, the air was warm. Luke lit the lamp, while Anoki dried her hands by the fire. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Anoki flinched at the sound, but only a little. Luke noticed. "Storms can be loud," he said gently. "But storms do pass," Anoki replied, surprising even herself with her own confidence. Luke smiled. He could see how much she had grown since the day he found her alone on the road, tired, frightened, and unsure of her worth. Now she stood straighter. her eyes clearer. She still looked gentle and small, but something strong was growing inside her. When the storm grew heavier, Luke made tea and set a cup in front of her. She wrapped her hands around it gratefully. "Luke," she said softly, "may I tell you something?" "Of course," he replied. Anoki stared into the steam rising from her cup. "All my life, people told me I was too small for the world. They said I could not handle hardship, that I could not live independently. I believed them." Luke listened, saying nothing so she could continue. "But here," she whispered, "I am learning that maybe they were wrong. Maybe I am not as fragile as I thought. Maybe I can face things. Maybe I belong somewhere." Her voice trembled. Not from fear, but from emotion. Luke spoke gently. "You've always had strength. You just needed a place where it could grow." Anoki looked up, her eyes shining in the warm lamplight. "Thank you for helping me see that." Luke shook his head lightly. "You did the work. You found your courage." Rain pattered against the windows. The storm was strong, but inside the house, the atmosphere was calm and safe. Anoki felt something settle softly inside her heart, like a weight she had carried for years was finally lifting. After finishing their tea, Luke stood and walked to the window. "Storm's passing faster than I expected," he said. "The land will be quiet soon." Anoki joined him at the window, watching the rain slowly lighten. The storm clouds drifted away, revealing a soft glow of evening light behind them. The world outside looked washed clean, fresh and new. "Do storms always leave the world looking different?" she asked. Luke nodded. "Yes, they come strong, but what's left behind can be peaceful." Anoki thought about her own life, the fear, the doubt, the feeling of not fitting anywhere. She realized her journey was like a storm too. Painful at times, heavy, frightening, but it had brought her here, to a place where she was learning who she truly was. Later that night, when the storm fully passed and the sky cleared, Luke stepped outside to check the land. Anoki followed him. The night air smelled of wet earth, and stars appeared one by one. Luke pointed upward. "Look there," he said. "That bright one. It always shows after strong storms." Anoki gazed at the star, glowing steady and calm in the dark sky. "Very small," Luke said. "But its light travels far. It shines even through the darkness." Anoki felt those words settle deep inside her. She was small, but maybe her strength, her courage, her voice, maybe they could shine too. Luke turned toward her. "Anoki, you've grown more in these few days than some people do in years. You should be proud." Her eyes softened with emotion. "I am learning to be proud." "You should," Luke said quietly. Silence fell between them, peaceful and warm. The wind was gentle, not harsh like before. The land glowed softly in the moonlight. Anoki wrapped her blanket around her shoulders and looked out across the fields, seeing beauty and possibility instead of fear. "Luke," she whispered, "when you found me on the road, I thought the world was too big for someone like me. I thought I could never be strong." She whispered. "I thought I could never be strong." She whispered. "And now?" he asked. She took a slow breath. "Now I know I can grow. I can learn. I can be more than my fear." Luke smiled. "Yes, you can." They walked back to the house, side by side. Anoki felt lighter than she had in years. She didn't know exactly what her future would look like, but for the first time, she felt she could face it. Inside, she paused by the window where she had first watched the sunset days ago. The room felt like a safe place now, a place where she had begun to rebuild herself. Finally, she turned to Luke and spoke softly but clearly. "Thank you for holding a place for me to grow." He answered simply, "You did the growing." Anoki nodded, knowing it was true. She was still small, still gentle, still quiet. But she no longer saw those things as weaknesses. She saw them as parts of who she was, parts that could coexist with strength, courage, and hope. As she closed her eyes that night, she felt the deep, soothing calm of a life beginning to change. Her journey was not ending, it was just beginning. And she was no longer afraid of the world. She had survived her storm. She had found her strength, and she would carry it with her wherever she went.